U luistert naar Radio Veronica, het station waar muziek in zit. Koffietijd.
All day and every day. This is Radio Caroline, 7 days a week.
It's smooth sailing with the highly successful sound of wonderful Radio London.
Well, if you're feeling down, come on and get happy with wonderful Radio London.
Wonderful Radio London. Have you heard?
Please allow me to introduce the Managing Director of Radio London, Mr. Philip Birch.
It came about because of Caroline. It came about actually a bit earlier than that because the Swedish station, that and Veronica, had been on air for some time before Caroline, and I think they inspired Caroline. And then Caroline came on air and did it incredibly badly because Caroline's approach to commercial broadcasting was one that was completely out of touch with reality. Their idea was that they thought they needed a commercial station in order to provide a facility for records to be aired. At that time, if you produced a record in this country, if the BBC, for some reason, for its own perfectly good reasons, didn't like to broadcast it, it got no exposure, and so the chances of making a sale or making a hit with a record were quite small because there was just no exposure opportunity. And that was what was behind Caroline.
Record Fair. There's a Radio Caroline record shop in your town. The shop with the bell in the window. The record shop to get the records you hear on this station. The shop where you get photographs of the DJs and the good ship Caroline. The place to join the Caroline Club. Keep listening. In Stockport, Cheshire, there's Neildon Hardy Limited of 14 Great Underbank. In Manchester, it's the Jamboree, 60 Victoria Street, Manchester 3. In Bury, Melody Fair Limited at 24 Market Street. In Colne, the Almain Company, 34 Market Street. In Oldham, Discland Limited of Market Avenue. In Warpton, Discland Limited of Arndale House, Bolton Road. And in Ashton-under-Lyne, the Groove, 8, 10 and 12 George Street, Ashton. So now you know where to get the latest and greatest records, photographs of Radio Caroline and the DJs, and where you can join the Caroline Club. If you missed any names, write to 61 Lord Street, Liverpool 2, and they'll be happy to tell you of your nearest official Radio Caroline record shop, the record shop with a bell in the window.
Thank you very much indeed, Carl. The time on Caroline? Now, let's see, it's 23 minutes before 9 o'clock. 23 minutes before 9, you're listening to the early show coming to you from Radio Caroline, your all-day music station, situated at 199 meters on your medium wave band. Stay tuned to us. We've got all the best sounds for you.
When Caroline came on air, although it had quite a following in that it was a very romantic era in broadcasting from the seas, it was incredibly badly managed, and the whole thing was a financial disaster. In fact, Caroline was pretty consistently a financial disaster from beginning to end. Not absolutely all the time, but the majority of the time. And of course, the result also was that it didn't sound as good as a commercial station should sound. And of course, this is likely to be when, in fact, if you have a radio station and your purpose is to promote certain records, then you'll tend to give those overexposure, and you will not be taking those records or broadcasting them on merit, but you will be broadcasting them because you have a financial interest. And that in itself made the sound wrong. So I was talking about this to a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, and together we got the idea, well, we could do it so much better. I could do it so much better because he was an American. And so we got on the phone to a number of old friends, and everybody coughed up some money, and off we went, and it started from there.
Wonderful Big L, Radio London. Wonderful Big L. Wonderful Radio London. Wonderful Radio London.
The whole thing was a strange sort of gamble in that I had worked for J. Walter Thompson for almost 15 years. It was just about 15 years. And most of that time had been in the United States. And coincidentally, I had that summer, I think, been thinking of doing other things. In fact, I had a property company that I'd set up when I arrived back in the UK 2 or 3 years earlier. That was doing fine because property was very successful in those days, and many years since it's been successful. I mean, not that company, because I decided to wind that company down because I couldn't possibly do that and Radio London. But what I'm really saying is that I was ready to move out of advertising, and I didn't quite know which direction I was going in, although I was thinking property. So when I left J. Walter Thompson, I can remember the managing director of J. Walter Thompson said that he thought I was out of my mind because I had a marvelous career with JWT and I was throwing it all up, that the government was going to bring in legislation that would put us out of business within 6 months. And the fairly substantial amount of money that we had to find for the ship and the whole cash flow, the operation, employing all those people before we started broadcasting, would go down the drain. So I can remember replying that I've done my sums very carefully, and I figured that if we could survive 18 months and the government would stay away from us for 18 months, we could survive more or less forever, because by that time we would be completely viable and financially successful. His reply was, "You're out of your mind. You'll be sunk within 6 months." And it was very sensible advice. I'm not in any way saying he was wrong, because it certainly seemed like that, but I just very much wanted to do it, and sometimes I suppose one does things on the basis of intuition and forgets good judgment, and I don't recommend it to anyone, but in this particular case I did want to do it, and it paid off.
If you want to sell in England, if you want to tell everybody what you've got, radio's the way to do it. Radio London is the very spot.
We decided that we would do it in a completely professional way. We knew how to do it in a completely professional way. We knew that one needs jingles for links, and one needs it for the whole sort of sound and the speed of presentation, the vitality of the station. So we went to Pam's because one of my colleagues lives in Dallas, and so that was easy. But of course I knew of Pam's because I lived in New York for many years, and Pam's, among many other things, supplied the jingles for New York's most successful light entertainment station, which was WABC.
Music Power
77 New York, WABC.
Music Power 77
New York, WABC. Wow! 77 WABC.
Music Power.
WABC. KFWB, Channel 98. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wonderful Radio London, biggest sound around Big L.
Anyway, so we got our jingles produced there, and then we had to set about buying a ship. And one of the partners knew somebody who knew somebody. It was one of those things, who had this old American minesweeper, which I think had a Spanish name at the time because it had been used as some kind of a cargo ship. And so we bought it and changed its name to Galaxy because one of the things in the presentation of Radio London was to talk big. You remember we called it Big L. We wanted to do it in a big and professional way. And Galaxy means big, and it also means stars. And so we liked that. That was the reason behind. We even thought of calling it Radio Galaxy, but that was inconsistent with our overall aims of. We really believed that commercial radio would come, and we wanted to be in the vanguard of that. I mean, we hoped. We didn't succeed, but we hoped that we would eventually be licensed to broadcast from the shore.
From a very modest beginning in antiquity, where Romans roamed, Saxons sacked, and started our history, this self-reliant, sprawling giant of a city came to be. London, London, that's my hometown. London, London, that's my hometown.
The Twinkle came in July 64, and we were on air just before Christmas. It was December 23rd, that sort of date of 1964. So in that 5 months, we sort of raised the money, bought the ship, fitted the ship out with the 50,000 watt RCA transmitter and the enormous mast, sailed it across the Atlantic. I mean, we had a professional crew sail it across the Atlantic and set it up in the North Sea and start broadcasting. It was a fairly busy 5 months. The heating in the ship was completely inadequate. I mean, there were so many things that when we set up station off Frinton that we had to put right, because our poor crew were freezing and our DJs were freezing, and we had to really finish it off this side of the Atlantic.
Have you ever been?
No.
Have you ever been?
You tell me.
Well, needless to say, you're okay with wonderful Radio London.
Yeah, that's where you're tuned right now. From the 12 to 3 with a double D. That's me, Dave Dennis.
One looks back with hindsight, because I always say setting up Piccadilly Radio was so easy by comparison, because first of all I'd done it, and secondly one didn't have to do it in a slightly underhanded way that we had to, of course, because we really didn't know how we would be treated by the government. And secondly, broadcasting from the sea is very, very difficult until you know how, of course.
Wonderful Radio London, news around the clock.
Dateline Tuesday, January 12th. Aviation. Leaders of the aircraft industry are to visit Chequers on Friday to discuss the current crisis with the Prime Minister. Defence. Orders for 3 more frigates worth £15 million have been placed by the Ministry. The docks. Meat handling methods have been criticised by the Port Medical Officer. In London, statistics show that the birth rate in London is rising, but so is the death rate due to cancer and heart diseases. 1 in 7 babies born in London are said to be illegitimate, the highest rate in England. This is Peter Brady reporting.
Here's the latest weather word on wonderful Radio London.
It'll be cloudy and wet in eastern districts, long clear periods in the west where there may be slight to moderate frost tonight. The high today, 8 degrees centigrade, 46 degrees Fahrenheit. The low tonight in eastern districts will be 2 degrees centigrade, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. But in the west, the temperature may drop to minus 1 degree centigrade, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The winds will be fresh and strong, veering westerly.
You're hearing things.
You're hearing things.
On wonderful Radio London.
Excuse me, sir, are you the owner of this vehicle?
Yes, I am.
And where might you be going in such a hurry?
I was on my way home.
Home? What for, sir, in such a hurry, might I ask?
Well, I didn't want to miss the Paul Kaye Show.
The what show, sir?
The Paul Kaye Show, every day on Radio London.
And might I have your name, please, sir?
My name, Dave Cash.
Wonderful Radio London.
Ben Toney worked in a radio station in Texas, and we brought him over as our program controller. His role really was the sound of the station. He was the person who was a professional broadcaster as such, who was responsible for the whole speed and vitality of the presentation. So Ben Tony was our first program controller, and he was with us for, I forget, perhaps a year, something of that sort, and then eventually Alan Keane became our program controller and was program controller for a much longer period of time.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's Mark Lehman 5 there, and Tony Blackburn's Climber of the Week. 3 minutes until news time on the Big L. So,
You're a winner with
Wonderful Radio London.
and on Wonderful Radio London, this is on the CBS label, Just Like Us, featuring Paul Revere.
Just like me.
It's amazing, but broadcasting business is really quite a small fraternity. And I noticed this again when I set up Piccadilly Radio, that you don't have to do a thing. People come to you. Word gets around so fast. People from Caroline came across and asked for jobs. I never had to run an advertisement, do anything. I mean, people just came, and I just interviewed people that said, "Hey, I hear you're setting up a commercial radio station, a pirate radio station, and I'm a marvelous engineer, and can I come and be one of your engineers?" And then I would check their credentials and do all the normal things that one does in employing people and making a decision.
There you go, there's a record by Ike and Tina Turner. It's number 1 in this week's Fabulous 40. It's called River Deep Man. Hi, there's your information. 1 minute after 9 o'clock, so I'm cutting into the Romans time. I'm terribly sorry, Mark. I'm
not talking to you.
You're not talking to me?
Not yet.
Whoopee, just what I've been waiting for. It'll be dry but cloudy in the east and southeast tonight. The Midlands will have light rain, so will the north. So there, north. A few thunderstorms may occur in isolated areas. Tomorrow will begin dry but cloud, and showers are expected later. Tonight's low 11 centigrade, 52 Fahrenheit, with tomorrow's expected high 22 centigrade, 68 Fahrenheit, which is close to the seasonal average. You know, ever since you started... You're talking to me, yeah?
Yeah, I'll talk to you now.
Just the next minute. Ever since you came to Radio London, you're going sort of faster and faster. Absolutely true, yeah.
Ah.
I don't know what to do. It's easier to do, to sit here and just sort of say the names of records. I'm wondering what to do about it.
How about committing suicide?
I tried that.
Didn't it work?
I'm thinking of giving up Bovril Butties, you know. I couldn't stand the pain now. Ladies and gentlemen, shut up. We present our... He's just gone home. I realise that Alan Keane is listening to this. Something wrong with the microphone switch, and the people are suffering because you're just about to come on. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, our skeleton in the cupboard, and boy does he look the part. Mark Roman.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Roman Empire.
Hail, citizens, and welcome once again to the Empire from now till midnight tonight, okay? Yes, that was right. Something wrong with this microphone switch. Never mind, 3 minutes past 9 o'clock, and let's have the Beatles.
It's the back
In setting it up, remember the July to December setting up period in 1964, I decided the first thing I should do would be to hire 2 really good, knowledgeable advertising salespeople. This was the one exception to what I've just said, in that I actually went out after these 2 people. I did some research on this, and I was in advertising myself, so I had all the right contacts. And I hired 2 people that, before we went on air, whose job it was to go around to advertising agencies with whom they were dealing every day anyway. And they were both magazine advertising salesmen, and their names were Alan Keane and Dennis Maitland. And they came and worked for me immediately on a full-time basis. They loved the idea. I mean, they were really as excited about it as I was. And so the 3 of us were just very busy convincing people that we knew how to run a very professional radio station that was going to attract enormous audiences. Of course, as soon as it went on air, it became much easier to sell because it was real and advertisers could tune into it themselves. I mean, we always carried a radio set, and every advertiser we saw, we put it on his desk and played it. You know? And of course, it was getting a lot of publicity because it makes good copy.
If you want to sell in England, if you want to tell everybody what you've got, radio's the way to do it. Radio London is the very spot.
For further information about Radio London and what it can mean to you, contact Radlon Sales Limited, 17 Curzon Street, London. Do it today.
Call Mayfair 5361.
So the problem wasn't so much getting advertisers to accept it. I think it was more, we were very determined that we would be accepted as a real advertising medium, that we would deliver a large audience, we would deliver good value for money, we would invoice on time, and we expected our checks to be paid on time, and we were very much putting over the whole idea that it was a business-like activity. On the one hand, that was in our relationship with advertisers, and of course our relationship with our listeners was, my God, isn't it all romantic and exciting, and aren't we fantastic broadcasting from the sea? And the dual role worked fine because advertisers, who are generally very shrewd, wise people, could see how effective this approach to the listener was and how quickly our audience built up. I mean, we really had a mammoth audience of many millions, and we were able to sell advertising at a reasonably low cost per thousand.
Yeah, that's Polly Perkins there, doing great things to Falling in Love Again, the old standard. She liked it.
Listen, something important. There's lots of colds and flu about. Be ready with Beecham's Powders. When you get that shivery, sneezy feeling, act at once. Take Beecham's Powders.
Take Beecham's Powders.
That's a good idea and a good little tune. Here comes Nat King Cole.
And so gradually, we were accepted more and more until eventually our list of advertisers was 1,000. I can remember that we had some celebration when we had 1,000 for our 1,000th advertiser. We had him in and gave him a plaque or something. But they were great names. I mean, they were all sort of leading names in business in this country.
That's Herb Alberts and the Tijuana Brass. Tijuana Taxi. The end of that sounds like T.W. blowing his nose, isn't it? Never mind. It's going to be a great big hit for Mr. Herb Albert. 18 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock is happy get up and go time.
Shimmer into summer with color at your fingertips. Nail color pie event. Shimmer into summer with color at your fingertips. Nail color pie event.
Hi there, get swinging with the new Yvette nail colors. They're great, sunny, bright, long-lasting. Just right for the moderns. Yvette, beauty at a young price.
Shimmer into summer with color at your fingertips. Nail color pie event.
Exclusive to Woolworth beauty counters.
Oh, that's for sure. The next full bulletin of Radio London Newswise, ladies and gentlemen, at 8:30 with Mr. Duncan Johnson. And if you're driving on the road, thanks for tuning our way.
Thanks for tuning our way while you're going your way. Always drive with care and yours truly, Big L.
Oh, do take it easy, won't you? We'd rather talk to you than about you, customers. Here's the brand newie from the Unit 4 Plus 2.
We were successful much more quickly than we thought, and within 10 months, not 18, but within 10 months, we were absolutely financially sound, and our debts were paid, and our cash flow was good, and we were operating in the black. I would say from the period 3 to 6 months after we went on air, it was very apparent that we had a success on our hands. And by 10 months, the bank manager knew it as well. That sort of thing, everybody knew it because it was so successful.
You'll be sent absolutely no bill. It comes without cost to you. BCM, Ambassador, London, WC1. I'll repeat that again slowly so you can get it. BCM, Ambassador, London, WC1. And so until next time, this is Garner Ted Armstrong saying goodbye, friends.
You have heard The World Tomorrow with Garner Ted Armstrong. Send your letters to BCM Ambassador, London WC1. Again, the mailing address is BCM Ambassador, London WC1.
The World Tomorrow came about largely for financial reasons. They approached us, and I was a bit concerned about this, but they approached us before we ever went on air and wanted to carve out quite a big slice of time, sort of this 7 to 7:30 slot. It was that sort of time in the evening each day. Not a time that is easily saleable to advertisers. I mean, even now, that is not, because it's television time, and so, you know, we have some demand for advertising at that time, but not an awful lot. So I knew it was an hour that I could sacrifice as far as the advertising is concerned. And the contract that they offered was one that would virtually, well, would have gone a long way, and did go a long way, to guaranteeing our financial success before we went on air, you see. And that provided us immediately from, I think almost from day one. It might have been from January, but, you know, we went on air in December, but very soon after anyway, with a regular income each month that helped to guarantee our financial success. And once we'd agreed it and entered into that agreement, I felt very strongly that because we became an even greater success than we'd hoped, that was not the time for us to say, well, we will no longer accept that. So we stayed with it from beginning to end. It was a point of honor, I think, at that point. Although, you know, eventually we could certainly have seen as much or more cash back in selling the time, even though, as I indicated, it was not a period in high demand. But Radio London became so successful, we did have advertisers then almost queuing up to get on. They were very keen to get on air, and we had a self-imposed rule that we would only run 6 minutes of commercial time, and we said an average of 6 with a maximum of 7 in any hour. And we did that because it was and is the rule of television at the time. It was our way of showing advertisers how responsible we were in approaching the allocation of advertising time, and we wouldn't just sell 18 minutes or 20 minutes of commercial time just to make a quick killing, and that we would actually have a very tight controls. And we did. From beginning to end, we maintained tight controls. And of course, what we didn't realize was how that in itself helped, because that meant that, in a sense, our airtime was rationed, and advertisers were therefore very keen to book and get on it, you know.
Wonderful Radio London. Have you heard?
Swinging Radio England, hit bound. 3rd degree. South to Mark forward. Larry Deed on the radio. Much more of that Boz music. Soon to be 24 hours a day. Swinging Radio England, the British Isles and the continent, only 24.
England's finest. Swinging Radio England, where the music is due.
Today, this song is Boss Sound number 4. Manfred Band and all the boys. Pretty Flamingo.
Let's talk more music. Let's talk more music. The fun spot.
Swinging Radio England on the air at reduced power for transmitter test purposes. Will be going off the air about 15 to 16 minutes from right now. For minor technical adjustments, we'll be off to around 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon. So stand by, world. Thanks for dialing our way on the Dean Show. How do it grab you, darling? Nancy Sinatra. On sound number 19. How does it grab you, darling?
It was one of life's many worries. You see, those days I didn't have what I sometimes refer to that we all have as a worry vacuum. You see, a worry vacuum is the thing that we all have. If you don't have anything to worry about in life, you create something to worry about, because we have a worry vacuum and we must fill a vacuum, you see. In those days, I had never had to worry about my worry vacuum because I had so many worries. I mean, I had Wedgwood Ben continually trying to convince the world that he was going to put us out of business instantly. And so I had the dirty tricks department of the government. And being fair to the government, incidentally, they did not play many dirty tricks, but one or two, such as we could not use the ship-to-shore telephone. Now, there's no reason why we shouldn't use it, but since they controlled the GPO, we were not allowed to use the ship except for emergencies. So that cut off our links with the ship. It was that kind of thing that we were prevented from doing. We were prevented from using the Reuters news service, for example, even though we had a contract with Reuters. That's another story. But Reuters relies on GPO lines, as they were then, and the government said they were not going to be allowed to provide us with a news service. So we didn't get one. It was stopped, you say. Anyway, so with all of those worries, to have another ship steaming over to take up its position alongside was just another worry, you know.
Boss sound number 1! The Rolling Stones wrapping it up with the Larry Dean radio program. Swinging Radio England on 355 meters, broadcasting at reduced power for transmitter test purposes. We leave the air now. We'll be back on later this afternoon with much more Boss music.
This is wonderful Radio London, where you're hearing things. Where you're hearing things.
I can't remember if Bill Vick was an original investor. He could very well have been a very small one, or he could have been a splinter investor with another man who was very much an investor, a man who lived in Abilene in Texas. And I know his name, but I won't give you his name because one of the rules that we had, I mean, my American colleagues were always very much concerned that they might get into trouble with Uncle Sam. I think Uncle Sam actually liked the whole idea very much. I know Lyndon Johnson did very much indeed, because he was into broadcasting, and he'd invited me out to his ranch, and he thought it was very, very funny, and he enjoyed it all enormously. But we did have an agreement that their names would never be mentioned, and I never have. But of course, in the case of Bill Vick, he was well known because he was active in this country. He doesn't come in the same category at all. But he may have been a splinter part of another shareholding of a man who was very active with Radio London and disagreed very much with the way I was running it and wanted it run in a different way. This was all in the early weeks of Radio London, the usual sort of boardroom politics that one runs into with new businesses. So we had a battle, and fortunately, a boardroom battle, and fortunately I won, and so he went. And he said, well, fine, he was going to set up a radio station to show me how it really should be done. And he set up Radio England, which, as you may know, was a financial disaster. And to his eternal credit, he phoned me up one day and he said, I don't often say this in life, but you were right and I was wrong. Because it didn't, Radio England didn't work out, you know. It was rather an exciting venture. But I felt the big difference between his view and my view was that he was not in touch with the British people. And he wasn't a broadcaster or had no sort of broadcasting experience. But I felt that the key in making the translation was to really understand the British public. It is a different audience. It was more different in those days from American audiences. I mean, gradually, because there's so much television, there's so much similar radio, gradually the audiences aren't so different. You know, generally anything that succeeds in America is likely to succeed in here without much of a sort of a British translation. But in those days, you needed more of a British translation. And so many of the things that we had as part of the promotion of Big L, I didn't use until we were on air for... We didn't call it Big L, for example, until we were on air for over a year, because Big L came from Big D, which meant Dallas. That's where that idea came from. And I just didn't feel that we were ready for it. We had jingles, and I wouldn't let my staff broadcast them. And eventually they all ganged up on me, and they said, listen to this. I mean, this is so right, and so on. And I said, well, of course it's right. I mean, that's why we planned it, but I don't think it's ready yet. And they said, well, we do. And I said, if you do, it's ready.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Radio.
Radio.
Big.
Big.
L.
L.
Wonderful Radio London. Wonderful Radio London, where you're hearing swing. The music sings on Wonderful Radio London. Big L.
The London Sound. B-I-T-L. Wonderful. Music means B-I-T-L.
But anyway, that was the difference between his approach and mine. And so I think that he, with Radio England, tried to imitate American radio stations without any recognition that the British audience had been brought up in a slightly different way. They had a different background, a different attitude towards broadcasting. That needed to be taken into consideration. That's where the battle raged, and as I say, to his great credit, he did concede. He'd made a mess of it.
For a moment, you were mine. Hitbound on Swingin' Radio England, playing much more that Bob's music.
England's finest. Swingin' Radio England, where the music is new.
Today, this song is Boss Sound number one.
Hi, this is Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. I'd like to say welcome to the much more music sound of Swingin' Radio England.
Swingin' Radio England.
Broadcasting on 299 meters in the medium wave band, this is Radio City. News time is 10 o'clock. Radio City News on the hour, your voice with the news programmer. In Calcutta, the second Radio City Weather Watch. Today will be rather cold, but most parts of the British Isles will be dry with good sunny periods. There may be some snow showers in the north. Next news right here at 11 o'clock.
UKGM was because Reg Calvert, who ran what was called Radio City from a fort, wasn't doing particularly well. In fact, he was doing rather badly because although there was a proliferation of pirates then, in fact, most of them weren't doing well at all. The great success was Radio London, and the second great success was 390. And 390 had a sort of a middle-of-the-road sweep music format, and Radio London had a top 40. So Reg came to me with the idea that why don't we take over his fort, which was very similar to 390's, and use it for a second radio station in the sweep music, the good music category, in order to complement. I mean, eventually, as you know, Radio 1 and Radio 2 was built on this idea, but that came much later. I mean, they saw how successful we'd been, and they copied. Radio 1 was a copy of Radio London, and Radio 2 was a copy of 390.
In our next episode, Dr. Paul has a long conversation with his wife. A conversation during which Elizabeth gets quite a jolt. Finds that she has to do some quick thinking. Join us at this same time for the next chapter of this great story of everlasting love, Dr. Paul.
Dr. Paul can be heard every Monday to Friday at 11:15. Radio 390, presenting Eve, the woman's magazine of the air, brings you music from the shows.
So I talked to Reg, and I thought that this would be fine, and did my sums on the back of an envelope, and it seemed to be viable, and I was pretty sure that we could put out as good a sweet music station as 390. And so we agreed to go ahead and take him over, as it were. I think he was going to cling to something like 10% of the equity, and we were going to take over 90% of it. It was that kind of an arrangement. I remember going over the facilities for his staff and being very unimpressed. I went out, you see, and I didn't like it, and the way he was, because he was doing it on a shoestring, and I felt that it ought to be done in a much more professional way. And I thought the first thing I would do would be to put in, nice rooms for the staff on there to make it an attractive place to live. So I believed that we'd had some timber delivered, which was going to be the beginnings of rooms for the DJs. But we actually hadn't signed our agreement or anything of that sort. And his staff were still working on it, and it was still his Radio City. But it never came to be because his fort, this is all history now, but his fort was invaded by a couple of characters and a lot of seamen. The seamen were on strike at the time, and so they were hired to sort of take over, and they took over Reg's fort by force.
Dramatic news tonight from Shivering Sands off the Kent coast. A party of police are said to be on their way out to the wartime fort there, following reports that the pirate radio station on it, Radio City, had been taken over by a boarding party.
Now, you're one of the men who came aboard. Tell me, who are you and why did you come?
Well, my name is Elf. We were engaged as riggers to report to Terrace Pier at 11:30 that night. We were coming down, as far as we knew, we were coming down to do a normal rigging job. Well, after we got well down the river, we were informed then that what we were actually for was to come aboard here and stand by and protect these people's equipment. And when...
protected against what?
Protected. He said that it was his gear and he was going to take it ashore when he got permission from the shore people.
This is the man who hired you?
That's him.
Now, has any violence been used at all?
None whatsoever.
Can you tell me then why some of the studio equipment has been put out of order?
That I can't say because I didn't actually see anything put out of order, and so far as I know, nothing was.
And it was taken over by these characters, and that eventually led to, one of the characters was Oliver Smedley, and that eventually led to Reg going around to Oliver Smedley's house, and there was a row and a fight, and Reg was shot, and Oliver Smedley was charged with murder, and then that was reduced to manslaughter, and then he was found not guilty by reason of self-defense. But that was certainly the end of Reg, and it was the end of the whole UKGM idea. It killed it dead at that point. It died with Reg.
Steve. Hello there, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Just made it down, hero.
Just adjust me headphones. How do they ever feel? I got the high impedance ones on.
You got the high impedance headphones. Good God, I tell you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the KC Beatles Stones program.
And this is the nice relaxed program because we're all whacked, aren't we?
Oh, we got a party going tonight, Pretzel.
Have we?
Yeah, you know Smiler from Christie's.
Oh, the one who danced 15 pints at one time.
Yes, quite. Well, he's got his birthday today.
Is it? How old is he? He's not 21.
I think 13. I think something like that.
13?
And we...
those were the days, 13. I will remember the grin of the Buke when I used to... all the time.
All over the floor.
I always enjoyed a good...
Tell me I'm the only one, and then I might tonight I need you.
That's gorgeous, Percy.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Harry, in the old sound effects department. Good, Harry.
I got a line hooked up with upstairs. They're getting prepared for the party up there.
Are they?
Yeah, you want to check in and see what's happening? Pete Brady's putting the whole thing together there.
Okay, we through?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's go upstairs where the party's forming, I think.
That's Earl Richmond. That's Earl Richmond's cabin you got there. He's just going a little berserk. Just try and catch the message. Oh, there we go.
That's it, folks.
Every so often, and it seemed like every 2 or 3 months, in fact, there would be a flurry of activity at Westminster that something must be done about these pirates. And I remember it was Wedgwood Ben, as he called himself then. He calls himself Tony Ben now. He was the Postmaster General at the enemy, and he would make some statement in the House that they were going to put us out of business and so on. And of course, advertisers would see that in their newspapers, and they'd start to be concerned that they were planning advertising campaigns, perhaps on a medium that halfway through the campaign, according to Mr. Wedgwood Ben, would come off air. So we had to do an awful lot of reassuring that we felt that we were going to be able to continue if in fact the government acted against us. And also, of course, we became very familiar with how legislation works, and there is a period of grace. There's a 1 month, certainly. So we were able to tell advertisers that even if Mr. Wedgwood Ben was able to put an act through now, it would take a month, because that's it has to have the royal assent, and then it becomes law a month afterwards. And of course, fortunately, radio is a short-term medium in the sense that it's planned for very largely, not entirely, but very largely for short-term campaigns. And so 4 weeks in itself is quite a long period for a campaign. Not quite a long period, but an adequate period. And that's if it happened today. So most advertisers would say, well, what you're really saying is that you can absolutely guarantee that you'll be broadcasting 2 months from now. And you say, yes, we can absolutely guarantee that. It's fine. And so then we could reassure them, and we would get the advertising orders, in most cases, you see. And then, of course, as time went by and these little scares didn't add up to anything, of course advertisers got more confident. We got less confident because we could tell that the groundswell was there and that some kind of legislation was going to go through that would make it very, very difficult for us to continue broadcasting. So we started to develop plans to broadcast from overseas, because we approached the whole thing that we were going to broadcast forever. I mean, we didn't just say that, we really meant it, and had a very positive attitude to the continuation of Radio London.
Esta es la estación número 1 in London, England. Es mi favorita. Wonderful Radio London. Olé!
The plan was to broadcast it from land and to use the ship as a relay. And so we thought that we could come up with something that was fairly close to the Radio Luxembourg. You see, I mean, Radio Luxembourg gets away with its commercial broadcasting in this country because it is licensed by a sovereign state. And because it's been going for so many years, there's a sort of an entrenched attitude, that you can't stop it now anyway. But the fact is, it is licensed by a sovereign state, and it broadcasts to us and other European countries, just as we in the BBC, broadcast to overseas countries as well, So it was hardly likely that Radio Luxembourg was going to be stopped, nor has it been stopped. So we thought, now how can we come close to that? Well, we couldn't get a license from northern France. We tried, and the nearest that we seemed to come up with was Morocco. So I spent a lot of time on our last summer on air, when by that time it was very apparent the legislation was going through. Mr. Wedgwood Ben had moved on, and Mr. Short was the Postmaster General, or Minister of Posts, I think by that time it was called. So we looked to Morocco to see if we could broadcast from there to the ship and use the ship as a relay station. And that was our plan. And this was all done in great secrecy. I mean, I used to disappear from the office for weeks on end. And my staff used to think that I was going off on long holidays and my God, he's lost interest. And in fact, I was flogging around Morocco trying to get a license there. But before I did, events really overtook us in that it became apparent from the way the legislation was being drafted that even if we'd had the ship as a relay station, it would have meant that we were still acting illegally, that the people serving the ship would be acting illegally, and so would the advertisers. So that although we were doing this in great secrecy, and I really don't think anybody in this country knew what I was up to. I really don't, because I would go to Morocco via Paris, and I went from Belgium, from Brussels as well, and I would book my flight only to Paris or to Brussels, and then when I got there, I would book the rest of it, so that in fact there were no tickets even being bought in this country to get me to Morocco. They were all being bought in France and in Belgium. I was so careful that nobody knew about this. So I don't think the legislation was framed because they thought, this fool's off in Morocco trying to get a license. Mind you, of course, the Moroccan authorities could have told them. I didn't feel they did, but who knows with politicians, But certainly when the act was framed, that it was very apparent that we weren't going to succeed. We then looked at things such as broadcasting Radio London in exile. Monte Carlo was one idea, and the people on Radio Monte Carlo were prepared to let us use their nighttime broadcasting hours. They had no audience at that time. I'm not even sure, in fact, if they were broadcasting. They were probably sending out a carrier wave, but not actually broadcasting. I'm not sure of that, but I remember that we could use it from sort of midnight until 3 a.m. and call it Radio London. And it would be Radio London in all ways, except it would be coming from Radio Monte Carlo. They liked the idea very much. The terms were quite reasonable. I forget what they were, but I remember at the time being quite happy with the terms. But when I did the sums as to the cost of running such an operation, I found that it just wasn't going to be viable. And very quickly, one would have been running in the red. And it's just no point in setting up a business when you can see right at the start that it isn't going to be financially viable. It just causes a lot of heartache for other people. And in fact, you may recall that some years later the same thing was tried, and it wasn't successful. The sums held up, that there isn't a market in this country for a signal from Monte Carlo at midnight, from midnight to 3 a.m. I mean, it's not a commercial market at all.
Have you ever been? Have you ever been? Well, needless to say, you're okay with wonderful Radio London.
Thousands of Radio London listeners have written personally to the Prime Minister asking him to save free radio. Unfortunately, these letters have been passed to the Postmaster General, who cannot be considered a fair judge since he is responsible for the government's monopoly in radio broadcasting. Postmaster General's secretary has sent a misleading printed reply to Radio London listeners saying that it is necessary to try to stop the independent stations in order to carry out the government's obligations to other countries and in order to avoid chaos in radio services. Radio London respectfully points out that the government's first obligation is to the British public, and technical experts agree that Great Britain could have dozens of free radio stations with directional signals pointed away from the continent.
2 minutes now before the news. Take us up to the news. We'll have a bit of ska music because there is no ska at the moment in the Fabulous 40. And incidentally, you're listening to the Fabulous 40 show with Tommy Vance from Radio London. And it's unfortunately the final and last Fabulous 40 show. So let's make the best of it.
Here now is the announcement you've all been waiting for. With the passing of the Marine Broadcasting Bill, Radio London regrets to inform its listeners that after nearly 3 years of broadcasting, it will be forced to close down in mid-August.
What we did was we took full advantage of the month's grace with the royal assent, And on August the 15th, the Act was going to become law. And so we decided that we would close down August the 14th. I think it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That would give the broadcasting staff time to come ashore and to finish and come home.
And now, Radio London presents their final hour.
You're hearing things.
You're hearing things.
On Wonderful Radio London.
It's Stuart here with Myrtle. Hello, Myrtle. Hello, dear. And Paul. Well, we've got fun for the next hour, haven't we?
Yes, indeed. And we're not alone with Myrtle because we also have...
Hi, this is Duncan Johnson. And with the demise of Radio London, an era has ended.
Hello, Big L listeners. Kenny Everett here. Big L will always be remembered as the fantastic radio station it is today because it's being chopped off at its prime. And anything that happens like that usually is remembered for years and years and years.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Cash, a voice you probably haven't heard on Radio London for quite a while. Big L gave the Kenny Cash program the biggest boost that ever happened.
Happiness is
T.W.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Great to be back on Radio London. Even if it is for this sad occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very thankful for this last opportunity to say goodbye and best wishes to Radio London's vast audience.
Well, Keith Skew signing off now, wishing you everything you wish yourselves.
Hello, everyone. This is Tony Blackburn here. I think this station, to me, has given everything, and everything I now have I owe to Radio London.
This is Pete Drummond. I've been with Radio London for 11 and a half months, and I would have liked to have made it a year, but when the Postmaster General says go, well, I suppose one has to go. Truthfully, Radio London has been a unique station where freedom of speech and music has not been denied to the disc jockeys or to the audience. I doubt you'll ever see the like of it again.
And the players took an early lunch. And unfortunately, at this time, we can't say the next news on Radio London will be heard at, so we just go to...
Some mention has been made of the fact that mine was the first voice to be heard on Radio London. It will also be the last in regrettably few minutes from now. But before that, please allow me to introduce the Managing Director of Radio London, Mr. Philip Birch.
Oh, yes. Now, I recorded my tape in the studios at 17 Curzon Street, and I did it about 3 or 4 days beforehand. I recorded it because I found the whole thing so emotional. It was a tremendously emotional thing to be happening. The listeners found that as well, as you may recall. And so I recorded it and sent the tape out as being my sort of contribution to the last hour. And I only spoke for a minute or two. I mean, that was probably my entire broadcasting on Radio London was in that one farewell message, which I thought was very sad.
In closing, I would like to give my personal thanks to all of the staff at 17 Curzon Street, to all of the DJs, to Captain Bunninger and his crew, to the 1,027 advertisers who have supported Radio London in the last 3 years and used Radio London to help sell their products. But most of all, I'd like to thank you, one of the 12 million listeners in the UK and the 4 million listeners in Holland, France, Belgium, Germany, and the other countries on the continent, for all of the support that you have given Radio London during the last 3 years.
Big L time is 3 o'clock and Radio London is now closing down.
Wonderful Big L. Radio London.
We continued with our offices on 17 Curzon Street because the winding down of Radio London took 7 or 8 months, as I recall, maybe a little longer. So then the captain, Captain Bunninger, sailed the ship over to Hamburg, I think largely for nautical reasons. I mean, the ship was always run by the captain the way a good ship should, and he found a place where he could take in the docking. Either he did or the ship's agent. I'm not terribly sure. I think he sailed it over the next day into Hamburg, and I didn't sail over with it. I drove over and met him at Hamburg when he arrived. We sort of cleared it through German customs together. I can remember that because he was like a lot of Dutchmen. He'd been a captain of a shell tanker during the war, and he was tremendously pro-British and tremendously anti-German, and the war certainly lingered on, even though it was 20 years after the end of the war. And Captain Bunninger spoke very good German, but he insisted on speaking English to the to the German customs officials. I don't know if Dutchmen still do this, because he didn't want to use the language of the people he hated so much. I don't know what Captain Bunninger's doing now. I imagine he's passed on, because he was probably in his early 60s at that time. We had lots of offers, to do various things with it, but we decided that we would lease it off to another group that wanted to broadcast to another country. They didn't tell us where. We could understand their need for secrecy because we'd been through all that some years before. We sort of checked them out, and they seemed to be financially solvent and so on. It's very difficult to check out people under these circumstances when there is so much secrecy. In fact, they incurred a lot of debts, and the ship eventually was seized to pay their debts, which was a rather sad ending to it, and we lost it because of that. Not because of anything that we did ourselves that was in any way wrong. It was just that the people that we leased it to, they never attempted to use it. It was, from that point on, it was a fiasco. I'm glad that we were not part of the fiasco. It simply meant that we didn't get we lost the ship. We didn't get our leasing fees back at all. Just sad.
Wonderful Radio London.
The Philip Birch interview was edited and produced by Leon Tippler for Alpha Sound. Interviewer, Steve England. Air checks and archive recordings from the private collections of Leon Tippler and Steve England. Alpha Sound would like to thank Barry Charnley of Pam's Productions for the Pam's jingles used in this production.
Wonderful Big L. Wonderful Big L, wonderful radio.